Welcome back to Crit and Crit. I'm Axion.
And I'm Scint. And you can see we are playing Final Fantasy V, which is kind of nostalgic. It's one of the older Final Fantasies, and it's one of the few I've actually played. What are your thoughts on the game, Axion?
I'd say it's my third or fourth game in the series, with 6 taking the crown and 9 taking the silver.
9 is my favorite, probably because it's the first one I actually played all the way through. I only got about halfway through 6. I have played through all of 4 and 5, though, and about 10 minutes of 10, because I embarrassingly kept getting turned around with the map and never actually left the first area when you're supposed to meet Riku. I'm a scrub.
Yep, and as you can see, this is the Steam version of the game with the weird sprites.
I mean, they don't look bad, but it's kind of fun to talk about nostalgia sometimes, because, honestly, with just everything, it's kind of nice just to think about easier times back when, things are simpler and made more sense. And something that kind of sticks in my mind is how your perceptions of things can change so vastly from when you're a kid to when you're an adult. Like, did you ever get invited to a Chuck E. Cheese birthday party when you were a kid?
A couple times, not a lot.
And, you know how when you're, 5 or 6, Chuck E. Cheese is, just the pinnacle of luxury? Like, you get to go to a place that you get pizza, and then there's games while you're waiting for the pizza, and it's just, you can have all the sensory overload you want, all the soda you can drink, to give you more energy to go play skee-ball and win all the tickets, and then carry home this teddy bear that's bigger than you are, but only if you spend 5 solid hours marathoning skee-ball so you can get enough tickets to get it. Otherwise, you're going to settle for the cheap jewelry you could probably just order on Oriental Trading for 1/10 of the price of the tokens your parents keep giving you to shut you up. But it is absolutely made with children in mind. It is a child's casino. It taps into everything you want, and it's exactly what you need at that moment. And it is the best thing when you're 6. And then, you get older, and maybe you're a teenager who's dragged along because it's your younger cousin's birthday party or your sister's friend's birthday party, and your parents didn't want to go, so they make you take them. So you gotta sit around with a bunch of kids that you've always found obnoxious because they tend to go through your stuff if you don't lock your door, and you're sitting there and they're just shrieking endlessly, and they're playing the games, and it's just getting louder and louder, and you just want to go work on your homework that's going to be due soon because, you're trying to get caught up on things so you can pass your classes, and you don't care so much about Chuck E. Cheese, and, the smells kind of get to you and everything's a little bit sticky, but it's still not bad. I mean, it's more fun than, if you got dragged to just, one of their houses where it's, sitting around with the parents of the other guests and you're the only teenager there, and it's just kind of awkward, but it's all right. And then you get to be an adult, and Chuck E. Cheese is literally the worst possible thing because it's everything you remember being a problem about the place when you're a teenager times 10, because now you also have to pay for everything. So you're worried about the fact that it's going to be overpriced, and the pizza is absolutely awful and made of grease, and it's just basically acid reflux on a dripping plate. The music is way too loud and discordant, and honestly, you're starting to realize that the animatronics have always been kind of uncanny valley and creepy, especially since you know very well that there's a reason the Five Nights at Freddy franchise has latched on to people's psyches as much as it has, because yes, the Chuck E. Cheese mascots have always been that creepy. Of course someone would make a game about existential terror of Chuck E. Cheese coming to life and ripping your throat out. And not to mention that you're keenly aware of addiction as a thing and just the psychological damage that can be done from exposing people to gambling practices like this at such a young age, and maybe leading to lasting societal issues going forward, because Chuck E. Cheese is, a very subpar pizza place with sensory overload to distract you from how crap everything is, with kind of dim lighting and rigged games and a very unbalanced prize system, but the kids are going to keep shrieking to go back because it's fun and we want to go back to Chuck E. Cheese, and you don't understand why you ever liked Chuck E. Cheese when you were a kid to begin with. So, yeah. Anyway, we're talking about Harry Potter.
Right, so that was an intro. Harry Potter, the foundation of a multimedia empire in the modern era.
So, what's your early experience with Harry Potter?
I was 24, 5-ish. It was when the third movie, I think, had come out. Something like that. I
So,
don't remember precisely. It was after a couple of movies had come out at least. The books were on like 4 or 5, and a friend who is now my sister-in-law was reading them and suggested that I should read them, that I might enjoy them, and that it might help because we were going to go see the movies. And I think I saw the first movie and then read the books. Anyway, it was not a part of my childhood is the point. I was in my college years when I read it.
okay. First thing I have to get, like, this is just mandatory given my job and everything. Of course, you were introduced from the books, from the movies, and didn't read the books first. I was 10 when the books came out, or I think the third book had come out when I was about 10. I need to double check the exact dates, but I had not heard of them until my 5th grade teacher decided that she was going to read the first book to class. Which is, in retrospect, really interesting to me because of all of the religious controversies that I remember springing up around it when I was a child about how it promoted, like, Satanism and refuted Christianity, because I went to a Catholic school, and we didn't have a single parent complaint about a teacher at our Catholic school reading Harry Potter to our class. So it was like we'd finish our religion homework and then, okay, let's read the next chapter of Harry Potter. And at the time, it didn't really sink in just how incongruous that was, but looking back, it is absolutely hysterical to me. But yeah, it's one of those rare times that I can honestly say I was right smack in the middle of the ideal demographic for a major pop culture movement. Because I honestly have tended to miss the boat on most of the cultural zeitgeist for a lot of things. Like, to this day, I've never seen an episode of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, even though, like, most people my age and roughly around my age can tell you a lot more about that franchise than I can. Like, I remember they're named after Renaissance artists, and that's about it. I can't tell you much else. I missed out on...
I am exactly the kind of person that could talk your ear out about Ninja Turtles, because that was my jam in my age 4 to about 12.
Well, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a boy show, and, you know, in the 90s and early 2000s, like, gendered marketing was still very much a thing and very effective at it. So there are a lot of shows and things I missed out on because, like, oh, that's a boy thing. Like, I never read Goosebumps. Partly because that was something all the boys read. And it's interesting now because, like, the idea of gendered books is really silly because, ooh, words on a page, that's absolutely going to change things. It's like, no, it's people enjoy good stories, so it's kind of silly. And it's even funnier to me now because, like, I know that there are basically studies that have shown that, like, girls are more willing to read books about boys than the reverse, which is one reason the Harry Potter franchise was so successful. Boys were more willing to read it because it's got a male protagonist. Girls were willing to read it because girls are generally more willing to give more books a try. And I had kind of just started getting into, like, fantasy as a genre. I think I had gotten talked into reading the Prydain Chronicles by a friend around that time, and just had read some other urban fantasies and minor fantasies and stuff as well that I can't remember the names of right now because it's been like 20 years. But Harry Potter was the first one that, like, not only did I really, really get into it, but I could talk about it with other people. because other people had also read it, which was kind of a new thing. I was always kind of a nerdy kid who liked reading more than hanging out with people. So it was a unique experience to, I'm reading something, and that makes me in the loop and cool. And I think that's a huge part of why Harry Potter was such a big deal to me, is it made me feel like I belonged rather than being ostracized for liking something a little bit nerdier. And it's obviously different a little bit now today, because, like, yeah, there's still kind of a bit of an aversion to being nerd/geek, whatever term you want to use for it, but a lot of the habits and hobbies that would once have gotten you ostracized for that have become a lot more respected and accepted and celebrated to some extent. Not so much as, like,
culture is cool nowadays.
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting shift on that. But yeah, I was in 5th grade, 10 years old, and I was introduced to this series that everyone seemed to like, so I was doing something cool for once, and they were really fun to read. And, like, I was already a big reader at that point, so it wasn't that big a leap for me to be like, oh, yep, please give me another 300-page book. I'm fine with this. So, yeah, Harry Potter had an enormous impact on my childhood and my friendships and, honestly, just my personality going forward, I think, because, like, it just kind of solidified, yeah, I'm a reader. I'm okay with that. I like fantasy stories. I like reading. I like writing. So, yeah, maybe Harry Potter's why I became an English teacher. Who knows?
I mean, makes as much sense as anything else.
Yep. So, yeah. And Harry Potter, I should note, is not notable because it made kids read. It's notable because it made kids who wouldn't want to read. Because you always have kids who like to read. Like, even as literacy becomes more of a thing with people losing interest in books because, I don't know, they don't have an iPad or something. But you always have some people who are always going to come back to books because there's just something about finding a story that you can fall into and just distract yourself for a little while. But getting more people involved with the process of interacting with different people's stories and emotions and conflicts is something that needs to be a thing. And if that has to take the form of, okay, we'll adapt it into a movie to entice people to actually read this, I guess that's acceptable. I wish people would just, try the books, because, like, very few adaptations truly faithfully adapt things, because, like, different mediums require different things. Narration doesn't always translate to screenplay, and time constraints are a thing, so things get cut out and changes get made for the ease of shooting the film, and etc., etc. But yeah, I can't completely knock the existence of film adaptations as an art form.
I mean, it certainly works. How many... I'm gonna go for the low-hanging fruit here. How many people who have never really spent a lot of time in reading things got into books because of Twilight?
A lot. I'm gonna date myself here, as though I haven't already, with Harry Potter came out when I was in 5th grade. Twilight was becoming a thing right around the time I was doing my practicums and getting ready to start student teaching. So I definitely saw a lot of people with the Twilight books around when I was doing my classwork.
Yeah, speaking on my own, my sister was not a reader, but she read Twilight. My sister couldn't give one iota of a care about books, but she read Twilight. And I think if she'd been a little younger, or been a little more into fantasy, she might have read Harry Potter. I think she just happened to just miss that boat.
Yeah, because, like, there obviously was a bit of a delay between the two things, and I think Twilight got pushed super hard because people were trying to find the next Harry Potter because of just the sheer cultural impact Harry Potter had. And it kind of revitalized some genres. Like, Harry Potter kind of falls into two boats here. Of one, it's urban fantasy. It is a modern day fantasy story. The world is as we know it, but also magic, and it's also a coming of age story. It's a 7-book series where we follow a kid from the age of 11 to 17. He's a little kid, he becomes a young adult by the end of it, and we get to see how he grows and changes and learns as a person by the end of the series. And coming of age has always been a pretty good, solid genre. A lot of classic literature falls into that as well. Urban fantasy has been less of a mainstay because there's just so many different subgenres within fantasy that you can't just paint it all with the same brush. Like typical like adventure fantasy, like Lord of the Rings, is different because like with Harry Potter, there's not a whole lot of we will travel and go on a great quest to the place to do the thing, at least not until late in the series. But like Lord of the Rings, it's all about like we must go to the place and do the thing, and we will fight great foes along the way, and but like there's still a suspension of disbelief involved that a lot of people who just dismiss genre fiction outright won't look into. Sci-fi and fantasy, the speculative fiction genres, will always be a little bit niche because there are people who are just like, oh, it has magic, I can't be bothered, or I'm not interested, this is not my thing. Harry Potter kind of bypassed that reticence for a lot of people just because of how pervasive and popular it was. And I think it's because it started out with like, we're in the ordinary world, but there's weird stuff happening. I mean, the first thing we see is the Dursleys insisting on how normal they are.
Right.
But yeah, like, it's interesting because just like, you wouldn't think a fantasy story would have that much impact. And like, I can't think of another fantasy series that has been quite as influential as Harry Potter in that regard. Like, Twilight had an impact too because it did basically like spur a whole bunch of copycats in the sense of like, there was an explosion of paranormal romance on the shelves at Borders, and I am absolutely dating myself again here. This is just going to be the We're Old series, isn't it?
Yep.
Back in my day. God, I did not think I was old enough to start using that phrase. It's been a long time since I played 5.
Busted.
Yeah, I did not remember that you met Ferris this early in the game.
Yeah, you pretty much have a whole party from the start.
Oh yeah, it's because of the job system, isn't it? Because like they know you're gonna have to spend forever just swapping your abilities out, so they might as well give you everybody right away. That makes sense. Also, I forgot the kingdom was named Tycoon, and I'm just literally thinking of all of the games names Tycoon. Lena, Roller Coaster Tycoon. We don't need an army, we just build a roller coaster that shoots our enemies off into the neighboring kingdom and let them deal with the problem. But yeah, and it's like, to kind of make the Chuck E. Cheese stuff tie in a little bit better, I still have a soft spot for Harry Potter. Just because, like, it's hard to get rid of the rose-tinted glasses when you look back on something that was that influential on your childhood. Like, I remember having a lot of fun conversations with my friends about speculating what was going to happen, talking about how the movies changed things, what parts we liked, who our favorite characters were, what house we'd be in. Oh god, what house you're in is still something I do. Like, every time I make a D&D character, I sort them.
You even have color-coded dice, specifically for each of the houses that you use for each character according to whichever house they're in.
Yep, I used my blue and bronze dice for my Ravenclaw Oracle in our Kingmaker campaign, and currently I have my Slytherin Halfling Swashbuckler who has my black and green dice. It just works. It's a really nice shorthand for quick characterization, because, I don't know, it's just fun. So it's it's not entirely fair for me to say Harry Potter is my Chuck E. Cheese, where I regret everything to do with it and wonder why I even liked it. Because, like, of course I liked it. It was a lot of fun. But that doesn't mean it's the best thing I've ever read. Like, as I've mentioned, I'm a big reader, and, like, when you get exposed to other things, you generally adjust your rankings. Like, Chuck E. Cheese is great pizza when it's, like, one of the few places you've been to get pizza. I've been to several other places that serve pizza that doesn't immediately make me run to the bathroom the way Chuck E. Cheese does. Represent emos.
Now I want emos.
Oh well. But yeah, it's just Harry Potter was a good kids series. The writing in it is not as refined as other authors are. A lot of the ideas in it are kind of surface level compared to what they could have been, what other authors in a similar position have done, and not all of the characterization and plot elements really hold up in retrospect. There are many things that I think could have been done better, but, I mean, she was a debut author at the time. This was her first series. So, yeah, you'd obviously expect there to be a learning curve, and I mean, it's targeted at like 10-year-olds to grow up with the book. They're not gonna sit here and go like, yeah, I don't really like the symbolism of Quidditch in terms of, I don't know, the bludgers represent, I don't know, parents. Please no one try that literary analysis take. I am literally pulling it out of my butt.
And a dragon out of the ocean.
That's Norbert.
No, that's Sildra.
Let me have my joke. But yeah, like, there are many stories I would say nowadays are, I think, a better take on the wizarding school story, on the urban fantasy genre, on the coming of age thing, on the chosen one narratives. Like, but Harry Potter was, for many people of my generation, an introduction to a lot of these. It's a gateway drug, and I will keep doing lines of fantasy, thank you very much. I have no intention of quitting that addiction anytime soon. I love me some fantasy.
Yep. And I assure you that we will be looking over a lot of fantasy on this show, because it's as much my drug as it is hers.
But yeah, so Harry Potter, definitely an important series, even if it's less quote-unquote meaningful as some of the other classic works that we have already discussed and will continue to discuss as we go through the growing list of things that we decide we want to talk about. Like, it's not the same cultural touchstone as A Christmas Carol. Harry Potter did not create the holiday traditions for something we know today and just start everything the way that did. But it definitely had its impact. I mean, Muggle is commonly used by a lot of people I talk to because it's not a surprise that I hang out with nerds, is it?
Nah, really.
And yeah, it's just, of course it had an impact. It changed things for an entire generation, and I do respect it for that. But that doesn't mean it's not something we can analyze, because really anything written down you can read into and analyze and see kind of what it can be used to say about wider themes and what the author might have intended, because again, once you put the book in someone else's hands, their interpretation is their own, as long as they can back it up and it makes sense. The author can say what they want, but, well, it doesn't take away the validity of someone's read on it, because sometimes you subconsciously say things. The term Freudian slip has been around for decades for a reason. So yeah, as we continue with this, we will definitely be looking into the entire series. We might do this in chunks just so we can take a break from talking about the same series endlessly, because there is a lot to do with a series with this much writing in it.
Yep. But that is where we'll call it for this episode, and we'll begin in earnest with the recap of the plot and beginning of our discussion next time. Thank you all, and see you then.
Bye!